In today's project, we're going to be building this creative agency landing page that you see on the screen. We're going to have a cool intro animation, button animation, and we're going to do parallax. We're going to do text animation and just going to make this look really smooth. So in this first video, we're going to be covering all the setup, the HTML, and the styling. So this is going to be a two-part series, and in the next one we're going to do all the JavaScript, all the animation, all the fun stuff. So I hope you like this, and yeah, let's do it. Okay, so before we jump into the code, I just want to go over the Figma file and the different sections that we have on this page. So what you see on the screen now is the Figma file, and yeah, I can just go through some ideas that I had. The left part here was initially going to be like a preloader. We're not going to build this in this tutorial. And then I have the main design here, and I have two versions. I think it's only the hero that's different. I tried a couple of different variations and landed on the right side here. So what we have is a hero section with yeah, just some type and a button, and we're gonna animate this section as well with like a cool button animation and some text reveal. And then like a show reel video. And this section in my head like should be like a parallax thing. So when you scroll, like the image scrolls within the container, or it moves rather. And then we have just a small about us section, so some content. And here I was originally thinking about like a slideshow thing. So like a cases thing where the navigation here on the right side, like you would scroll and you would like go to the next item. But thinking about it, having this in a scroll progress probably isn't the best UX. So we're only going to make this static, and you could make this into a slideshow or something. But for this tutorial, we're only going to make this a static section. And then we have a list. This is very popular on a lot of award sites. So you have a list where the lines animate and as you scroll. So yeah, I like this layout a lot. And I think it really, you can use it in a lot of different ways. You could have projects here, you could have talks like I have here, or yeah, any kind of list you could have. And you can have the like hover effect when you hover over an item, an image like floats on the screen or something. So we're gonna build that. And then the last section is just like a join the company section with a couple of images. And this could also be like an infinite slideshow thing. But for this tutorial, we're only going to make this static. In terms of the slideshow, we're mainly just going to focus on how you would build something like this and the thought process behind creating a page like this with animations and yeah, the markup and how you connect that to JavaScript and stuff like that. So yeah, let's jump into the code and start building this. So here I have a empty Vite project. Vite is a build tool, so vitejs.dev. And you can just do the get started here and create it with yarn or npm, whatever you prefer. And I just cleaned out the basic stuff they have in the template. So the only things I've added is prettier config. So we get the prettier plugin working, and yeah, just cleaned out pretty much what was there. So we have just an app with index.js, and I included the fonts in the public folder, and then the images that we're going to use. So first, we're going to start setting up the styles folder that we have here. And in this project, we're going to use Sass. So the only thing you need to do to get that working in Vite is npm install Sass, and you can import your Sass file in your JavaScript like this. So in the styles folder, I'm just going to make this file. So importing this. And now the JavaScript will just like handle all the compilation from Sass to CSS. And yeah, that's everything you need to do to make that work. So in the styles folder, we're going to have a structure called 7.1. I'm going to explain along the way, but first we're just going to create the folders and the files that we're going to need. So the first one is going to be abstracts. And then we're going to have a base folder. And we're going to have components, layout, and pages. So we're going to add files to each of these folders, and we're going to import everything in our index file. So in our abstracts folder, the first thing we're going to add is a variables SCSS. And in here, I'm just going to paste from the finished project into here. And here, the only thing that we're going to have in this file is CSS variables. So I set up the font in a variable, the primary color, secondary color. So the primary color in this instance is the black, and the secondary color, even though we don't have a secondary in this case, I chose the white color. And then I like to split up my variables into like very specific parts, or where they're going to be used. So for example, I have color background light, which is the white background, and I have background color beige, which is this one, and dark, which is the dark one, of course. And by like separating stuff into very specific variables, you can easily override it if you want to like do a dark theme or a different theme. You could just update your variables. So I have the same for like buttons and button hover, and light buttons and light button hover, and the text for the text on buttons and the text for light buttons, and then color for text and light color text and white color text. So, and then the last ones are the width from the desktop, which is here. So you see in Figma, we have 1440 as the width. So just put that in here, and then the mobile width. We don't have a mobile design right now, but I'm going to show you why that's important. So that's the variables file, and we're going to add two more files here. We're going to have functions and .scss. Whoops. And we're going to have mixins.scss. We're not going to use the functions in this project, but I still wanted to include it. And mixins is like, you can see here, it's like a group of code that you can reuse. So here I called this block of code visually hidden. So if I wanted to hide something, I didn't have to type this all the time. I could just say @include visually hidden, and that would like copy and paste this code into. So if it was like elements, or I could do this, and now this is the same as like having this inside. So yeah, you can just like group code and reuse it later. And I use this for either like grouping code or having like arguments that you can pass in. So I use this for media queries and stuff like that. Also have one for link hover, so I don't have to set this up every time. And yeah, so it's just like some code that you want to reuse. Okay, and the next one is base. And in here, we have another folder for typography. And we have a couple different files in here as well. We have one for animation. And we have one for our base style. And we have one for our container that we're going to use. And we're going to set up a grid. Whoops. And we have a reset CSS that we're going to include. And lastly, a section that we're going to create. So the first thing I'm going to set up here is the typography. We're going to have an index. The reason I have a folder here is because I just like to organize stuff a little bit better. So in here, we're going to have a type scale. So the reason I had in the variables a desktop and a mobile width is because I want to scale all the headings from a max width. So let's say I wanted to have a heading 1. Let's say I wanted to have this big heading. And I wanted to scale this from 80 pixels when it's on desktop to like 32 when it's on mobile. The reason I'm setting up these variables is because I'm going to use these to actually scale it as you scale the browser. So in the type scale, what we're going to have is, this is going to look a little bit advanced, but I'm just going to go through this code quickly. So we're just including math from SAS to use the math functions. And the fluid type mixin that we're creating, so this is a reusable code. We're saying what's the minimum viewport and the maximum viewport width in pixels. How it's going to work is like you're going to say @include fluid type, and we're going to pass in like 430 pixels, for example, and 1440 pixels. And so in between this and this, we want to have the minimum font size to be 40 pixels and the maximum to be 80 pixels. So all this code here is like just setting up a calc function and setting the font size to like scale in between that using viewport units. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to explain exactly what it does, but um, I really like this in my projects because I can just easily scale type, and you don't have to like think about setting a media query for your text. Okay, so we have the type scale, and then in the index, this is actually going to be without the underscore. I like to have one file for all my typography styling. So here I just pasted the setup that we need for this project. So I'm importing the type scale that we just created. I'm getting the font from our public folder. And here you can see on the HTML tag, I'm setting the font size to the desktop width that we have. And I'm using a trick where you can use rems a bit easier because usually HTML has the font size of 16 pixels. And then to convert rem, it's more tricky because you have to do math to actually get the right value in rem. But by doing 100 viewport width and dividing that by the width of the design file, so in this case 1440, and multiplying that by 10, what we can now do using rems is like, if I do, I don't know, let's say the width of this image, to get this exactly the correct width in rems. So here you see this is 684 pixels wide. By doing this little trick, now I can do, if this was dot image, I can say width is, just do like a dot here and do rem. So I can just convert anything to rem by just like taking away one decimal. So it just makes it a lot easier to work with rems from our design. And then I'm just setting up the fonts. I'm clamping the body font size, so the body text. And what I usually do is I set up my typography very thoroughly, because if you set that up really good, most of the design handles itself. So what I set is I always set like the font size, and I set the width, the margin on the bottom. I always think of stuff like margin at the bottom. I never use, or very rarely use, margin top. Like I wouldn't say this should have a margin top here. I think of this H2 as pushing down this text. And I think of this text as pushing down the button and not going up. So here, for example, when I include this H2 will have the margin bottom by default. Or I will set the margin bottom here. And I don't have to like, it won't sit like this, and then I have to push it up from the list, because it's just unnatural to think of margin going upwards, in my opinion. So yeah, in here I set the margin bottom for the paragraphs, and then for each heading, I have the actual heading, and then I create a class that we can reuse. So like this is an H2, for example, but I want it to have the same size as the H1 here. So then I can just use the H1 class. And here you see the fluid type in action. So on all the H1s, so actually if I do this, I have to start including stuff first. So I'm just going to copy this over. I'm not going to write everything. So in the index CSS file, we're just importing all of our files in the different folders. And I probably have to like comment out all of these for now. So let's see. If I go here now and I do title, you can see if I resize this, how the text shrinks and grows. So if I go back to here, the H1 will grow from, actually if I do this like 120, it's easier to see. So you see it grows until it hits 120 pixels and then it stops. And it can grow as low as 32 pixels and then it stops. So that's the nice thing about having a fluid type scale, is that you can specify exactly how small it should be and how big it should be, and like in between these sizes it should grow. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this as well. So here as well, I use the margin bottom by default. So when I set up this, I don't have to like specify a margin bottom. This is already set up. And I set up the line height and stuff like that. And the same for the H2. So in this project, we don't have H3 and H4 and stuff. But you would just continue like doing this and just setting up the H3 and whatever font size your designer gives you or you set yourself. Yeah, so that's the typography. And then we have an animation file with some like defaults that I use for animations. So this is just setting stuff, or I'm going to explain this later because this is connected to the JavaScript. So we're going to use this for the text reveal, and yeah, it's for like setting up animation specific styles. And then the base folder is like base styling that I want to have. So for example, we're going to use the Linus smooth scrolling. So I'm just going to include their recommended styles. And I have this aspect ratio trick that we're going to use, where you can just specify an aspect ratio on an image, and this will keep the aspect ratio as it scales. And then the container here, yeah, this is a very simple container. It's just for keeping everything in between, like the container that we have here, and then setting the padding on the right and left side. We also have a grid in the design. So if I turn this on, actually, you can see we have a 12-column grid with a gutter of 24, which is the space in between. So the way this works is, or in CSS, is I have a mixin called page grid, and that is just setting a 12-column grid with a 2.4 rem column gap, which is the gap in between here. And yeah, that turns out to be 24 pixels. And then we use this for loop in Sass to create some classes that we can use on the elements. So the way it works is like on your parent element. So parent would have this. So you would just say add include page grid, and that would apply this styling. And now in the HTML where we have a div, for example, we can say class. And this is setting up like, so a column and then a number. So it will be like start from column number 1. And then I'm saying span for however many columns. So say start from column number 1 and span 3, for example. So that would start here, and then it would span 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to use this for stuff like this. So this heading, for example, starts from column 1 and spans 4, like that. And then the text starts from number 5 and spans 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the button has the rest. So it starts from 9 and goes to 12. So yeah, that's how we're going to use that. You're going to see this later as we set this up. Okay, and then we have a reset, which is like a very basic reset. It's just setting things to the correct border box, margin, and removing margin and padding and stuff like that. So yeah, nothing. This is like very standard setup. And then the last thing that's kind of unique to what we're going to do in this boilerplate or template is the way I set up sections is I think of each section on a page as a section. So like, so this is a section. This could be the same section, but I would say the image is also its own section. And then this is a section. And so on. So you get the idea. But one thing that we often do is like we set up, for example, this as a section, and then we say only for this, we say margin top is 160 pixels and bottom is, yeah, this should be 160 as well. And like we do that for each section. But what I like to do is I think about only the content. So you see this little box here, the blue box. I only think of that as like the actual content, and whatever space is around should be taken care of by a section class. So I think of it like this. So we have the content inside. Yeah, it's going to be pretty bad design. So this is the actual content, and I want this to be like the div with class about or whatever. So that's this one. And then the black part here, that is a section. And then we're going to say this is a class section. And then we have to decide, is this padding or is this margin? Because this is the same background color as the actual background color of the page, this is going to be margin. So what we're going to do is we're going to say section, and then we're going to extend it by saying section. And then we have some classes that we can choose from. So I'm going to say medium and then margin. So that's how we're going to structure the sections. We have this section, which is a section tag. Then we have the inner one. But then the last thing we need is like the container here. So we have the section. And then on the outside, we have the container. I hope this is somewhat understandable, but this is how we're going to set it up. So we need the section to be the outside, and then inside we have a container. So this is going to be class just container. So this is our structure in code. The inner part is where our actual styling for this section goes. If this had a background color, so let's say this was like this. So if it was here, so if this had a background color like this, this section here needed to be padding instead, because background color can go on padding, but not, padding. So background color can go on padding, and then I would have a third class. This is starting to get very long. So I would have a section red or dark or something. That is specific to each project, but that's how it works anyway. So I'm not saying about is background color red. I'm doing everything on the section. So I'm trying to keep those separated. That was a very long explanation for something pretty simple. But anyway, we're going to do this over and over again. So I just wanted to explain before we go into the actual code. So here you can see how that works. We set up a root variable, and we say section small is 8 rem and medium is 16 rem. So that is 160 pixels, which is what we have here. So we have that a lot of places. And then this is a smaller one for 80. So that's a small. And then we have a big one for 240 pixels. And then just some utility classes like section relative to attach something if you want to position it absolute. And then here you see section dark uses the dark background color and then the white text, and section beige uses the beige background. And that's how we're going to do that for like this section and this section. Okay, so let's start setting up the HTML for this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up just this header. So I'm going to say header and then container, like we set up, because it's inside the container. And I'm just going to do a div in here. So class is header. And then I'm just going to fake like a logo. So I'm going to say header logo and just call it a new day. And then for the hamburger, I'm just going to say button. And I'm going to call it header hamburger. And I'm going to do line. So we have 3 lines in here. So then we're going to go in here, and then we're going to start adding these in the components or the layout. So a component is like a small piece of an item. Like a button is a component. A layout is like the hero, for example. This is a layout. And the header is also a layout. It's not like an isolated component. So we're going to add that in the layout. So we're going to say header, and then header, and then I'm going to say display flex, justify content space between to push the logo and the item apart. And then align item center. And I'm just going to do padding top of 24 pixels. And then the hamburger, since it's a button, we need to remove the border. I can show you quickly how that is looking. Yeah, so there's like a small border on buttons by default. So border none, display flex, and flex direction should be column. So we're going to create the lines that are going down. Going to have 6 pixels gap, and then the cursor of pointer. And then we need to import this file in our index. So here I can just uncomment this. Yeah, so now you see we have this over here, but we're still missing the lines. So I'm just going to do dot line and I'm going to do background color of color primary, which is the black one. So now you see the hamburger icon over here. Okay, and then we're going to do the hero. And this is going to be a little bit different from the different sections because I want to like have these in the same section tag, but still the spacing here and here are different from like the bottom one. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a section tag, and then we're going to do a container, and then we're going to add our hero inside. And then we're going to have 2 divs here, which is like the top and bottom part. So I'm going to do class, section, medium, margin. I'm actually going to have the same for the second one. So inside the top one, we're going to do the text and a button. And then we can say dot hero content, and then an H1 for the title with hero title. And then I'm just going to paste the text here. So here I just wrapped all the different like black words in a span. And then for the button as well, I'm just going to copy this in and explain why we're going to have this markup. So the button, we have a button class and a button dark to have the dark button because we also have a white button. And button FX, we're going to cover that later. And this is also wrapping our text in 2 spans because we're going to do the animation. And this is just the SVG for the arrow that we have. So, yeah. Okay, so it's starting to look like something. So we can maybe first style, or I'm going to add that image as well, actually. So in here, we're going to have hero image. And on the image, we have the like play button and the watch show reel text. And this is also an SVG. So I'm going to just copy paste this over. So the play, this is also just the SVG code for the play button. And then I just have a paragraph tag for the text. And then we're going to have the actual image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a div. And then inside I'm going to have the image. So this is in /images and then hero JPEG. And the reason for wrapping it in a div is because I can use the style aspect ratio that we set up. So I'm going to say aspect ratio is 16:9. And now when I resize this, you see the image just scaling in a 69 ratio. I could have this any ratio that I want. So I don't know, 6:9 or whatever. You see it's keeping that aspect ratio. So just going to do this. Okay, so we have all the content for the hero. So let's set that up now. So the hero is also going to go in the layout here. And I'm just going to do .hero. I'm going to have the content. That's the text and a button. So I'm going to say display flex, justify content center, align item center, and flex direction is column because we want to have the button below. And I'm going to say a max width is 100 ch, which is character width. Margin inline of auto to keep it centered, and text align center. And then we're going to do title. So this is going to be the majority of the text is going to be the color text light. So this light gray text. And then whatever we wrap in these spans. So this is going to show later because we're going to do like a text reveal effect. And these are going to be the black color. So it's going to be var color text dark instead. And then we have the image. We need that as position relative to position the play button. I'm going to use one of the mixins called center align. So this is just, doing the position in the middle trick. So I'm going to say at include center align, at include center align. And I'm going to do display flex, align item center. Going to do a gap of 16 pixels. So now I'm just like saying display flex and having this 16 pixel gap here. So we actually need to import this file as well. So you see now it's starting to look like something. We can't see the play button yet because we need a set index of 2. Yeah, so now it's just in the middle. And then the text here. So we're going to also do a cursor of pointer. This is not going to do anything, but it's just good to follow the best practice. And then change the color to color text white, like that. And then we have the text that's on top. So hero play, and then the text is going to be a different font size. So I'm going to use the fluid type that we made. So it's going to be from 430 pixels to 1440 pixels. It's going to go from 16 pixels to maximum of 24. So now you see it's 24, and we can scale it down, and it'll go down to 16 pixels. and then up. Okay, so now we just need to create the button. I'm just going to close this, and that's going to go in the components. So dot button. So this is a very custom button that we're going to create, because we're going to have the animation of it scaling from the center, growing, and then revealing our text and the icon. So the styling is a little bit unusual for a button, but just follow along and yeah. So it's going to be display flex, and justify content space between. That's to space these the text and the arrow. And we're going to do align center, gap of 8 pixels. That's also the space in between here. That should be 8. I'm going to set a font size here of 13 pixels. Text transform of uppercase. Letter spacing of 0.2 EM. When you have uppercase, you usually want to have a little bit of letter spacing to make it more legible. And then I'm going to set the padding to 14 pixels and 24. Border radius of just a very big number to keep the pill shape. And then we have to set these things to, so width needs to be max content, and the same with height. This is required for our animation and also to prevent it from like growing here if we set it to a specific width. So I just want it to be as wide as the content inside and not like grow in the X or Y direction. Okay, we're gonna have a dark version and we're gonna have a light version. So the dark one, so this is like the base for the button, and these are like the different themes. So I'm gonna say background color is var color button dark, and the color is var color button text light. These might seem too specific to some people, but I really like having it have a lot of control over my theme. I'm going to do the same for the light color. Button light. And I'm going to do button text dark. And on the light one, we also have to update the SVG path, because that this SVG color, this will not change if you don't change the actual SVG path. So in the light one, we want it to be black instead. So I'm going to say SVG, and the path is going to have fill of var color button text dark. Okay. So let's see. And then we just need to import it here. And there's our buttons. So already we have, yeah, a lot of the design like made, because once you set up the section and like your container and everything, styling something like this doesn't take a long time, to be honest. So let's continue with the about section. So I'm going to call this like text columns or something. You could call it whatever you want, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to simplify this. So let's see. So we're going to have a new section, And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say this is a section, and it's a section medium spacing of margin because we don't have a background color. And then a container. And inside here, I'm going to do the text columns. So with this one, I want to use the grid that we set up. So this is very easy to do now. We just create the layout, text columns, and we include that here. And now on the text columns, we can just include the page grid. So this comes from here. So now we have the 12 column. So yeah, basically the same thing as we have here. And now we can use these column and span classes to actually position the elements. So this is all the styling we need in the text columns here. Then we can do the rest in the HTML. So here we're going to have an H2 with the about us text. And we're going to do a P tag. And I'm just going to copy over all the text. And then lastly, we have the button. So I'm just going to copy the button markup here and place that here. And this is going to say our studio. Okay, so now you can see these are just like positioned one after another on the grid now. But now we're going to position them on this grid that we have set up. And because we set up the classes here, what we can do is we can, like on this H2, for example, we can say class. And then we're going to do the call and which column number to start, and then span and how many columns to span. So we're going to do call. So start on column number 1 and span 4 columns. So now you see this spans 4 columns. And yeah, we're just going to do the same for the rest. So class call 5 and span 5 columns. So already you can see like how easy this is to set up and use. You don't need like a advanced column thing to set this up. And the button is going to be column 10 and span 3. And then we just need to have a margin left. So I'm going to say dot button, margin left of auto. So that will just push it out to the side. And yeah, that is pretty much that whole section. And then we have the project section. And we're also going to use the grid here. So you can see how laid out this image to be on the grid and also this text. So yeah. Just going to close this for now because it's starting to get a little bit messy. Okay, so a new section. So this is going to be class section, and I'm going to use section projects and section beige. Or actually, I'm not going to use the projects one. I'm just going to do beige to get the background color, and then container, and then dot projects in here. So we have projects and left side and the right side. So the left side is only the image. So in here, I'm going to say sources images project.jpg. And here is going to be column 1 and span 6 columns. And then the right side is going to be column 7 and span 6 as well. And yeah, we also need to import this or set up the grid here, I mean. So projects. So we're going to include our page grid. We're going to say left side. We're going to have image. And we're going to have the right side. We're going to have content and text. And then we just need to import this in the layout. And what we're going to have is the left side needs a height of 100% to keep the image 100% of the section. And the same for the image. And here we're not going to use like the section spacing. I'm going to set this manually. So I'm going to say margin top is 16 rem. And I'm going to do the same for the bottom. And the content is going to have a max width of 45 character width. And the text here is going to have a margin button of 48 pixels or 4.8 rem. Okay, and then I'm just going to copy over some of the text here. So we have this project's heading. And we have class of projects text. And then we have the button. So I'm just going to copy this from here. I'm going to remove the columns. This is a dark button, and the button text is read more. So let's see. Yeah, so here we have the layout. I think one thing is missing. Yeah, we just need to wrap these in a content. So projects content, and then put that in here. And the last thing is we're going to use the same size as the H1 in the top for this H2. And when we set up the typography, we also set up the classes. So here we can just add H1, and that will have the same size now as the H1, even though it's an H2. Yeah, so I'm not going to set up this progress thing because we're not going to use any slideshow. So now we just have a couple more sections to go. So the next one is the list one. So here I'm going to do the same thing. So you see now how quickly this can be if you actually know this by hand. I know this already, and I also designed the site, so I know the values and stuff. But if you start implementing your own system and really get to know it, you can build things really quickly. I'm going to do section medium margin. It's going to be a container. And then we're going to have a heading with CR Talks. And this is going to be a list heading. And then we're going to have a UL with all the list items. Whoops. So this is just going to be a list. And then inside the list, we have an li with a class name of list item. And in each item, we need, because we're going to set up the same thing here, we're going to use the grid. We need 3 elements like this. So we're going to have 3 spans. And each of them are going to be spanning the grid that we set up. So the first one is going to be call 1, span 5. The second one is going to be call 6. Whoops. Call 6, span 5. And then call 11, span 2. So here we're just going to paste in all the content. I'm just going to copy over because it's going to be a lot of pasting. So I already set this up. So the whole list is like this. Actually going to remove this one. So yeah, I just duplicated the LIs and pasted the content from each of these list items. Yep, and then below that we have the button again. So I'm gonna copy here and paste that below and have more talks. So let's just see now. So now we see just the empty or unstyled list that we have. So let's start styling this. And I'm also going to add that to the layout, like list. I'm going to include it here. So I'm going to do list. I'm going to do list style none to remove the bullet points. Also going to do margin left of 0 to, because usually there's like 1 EM of margin. And then I'm going to do a margin bottom of 4.8 rem to push the button down. And then we're going to set up the item. That's going to be position relative. I'm going to include the page grid. And I'm going to have a small bit of padding. So you see already now that everything is like structured on the grid for us because I set up the columns and stuff. So yeah, it's already looking good. And then I'm going to set up an after pseudo element for the lines. So I'm going to say content is empty. I'm going to do position absolute, top 0, left 0. Going to do width 100%, and then height of 1 pixel. And then if we do background color of primary, so the black one, now we have the lines positioned above each item. And just going to set this up for the animation that we're going to do later. So I'm going to say transform origin is center left. And yeah, we're going to do the scaling and stuff later. So see how quick that was after we set up the grid and everything? It's just, yeah, not a lot of time to set up this at all. Then we just have 2 more sections. So the next one is a little bit different. There's a smaller section space. So I'm going to do section. I'm going to do class of section and section small and padding this time because padding can have the background color. And then I'm going to do section dark. So if we just see that, if I just do this, you see already all the padding and stuff is on the section. So that's nice. And then in here, the same thing, have a container. And then I'm going to call this just company. This could be called something different, of course. And we're going to have company content inside. And we're going to have a H2 with join the studio. So that's this one and then these 2. So then a paragraph with this text. And then the button again. So just gonna copy here. And now this is button light instead. And it's open positions. Okay. So we have that. So for the content here, we're going to use the same thing. We're going to set up the grid and we're going to position everything on a grid here. So going to do company and then company. And then for the content inside, I'm going to include page grid. And we need to include it here. And then for the H2, this is going to be start on column 1. And it's going to span 12 columns because it spans all the way. And this is on the next line. So now this spans across the whole thing. And these start on the next row. So let's do the same here for this. Class of call 1. It's going to span 5. And then the button is call 7 and span 6. Like that. So now the spacing here and at the bottom here is the same. So I use the section tag to have this spacing. And this is going to be its own space or section. And then let me see. Then we have the image grid. And that's padding as well. And this is section dark 2. And here we don't need the container because this is bleeding outside the edge. So I'm going to say .image grid. And we're going to have an image wrapper for each image. And we're going to do the same thing here as setting the aspect ratio to 5:7. And then have an image inside. So the source is just images / grid1 JPEG. And this repeats for all images. So I'm just going to copy this over here. So yeah, now you can see the images are just stacked downwards. So let's dial this. So image grid.scss. We're just going to do display grid template columns. Repeat 5 times, or repeat 1FR 5 times. We're going to have a gap of 2.4 rem. So yeah, that's just a simple grid that stretches across the screen. You could, like, of course, extend this and like have some scroll interaction where it moves side to side once you scroll. But yeah, this is just a static section for now. Okay, and then the last thing we need is just the footer. So let's set that up here. So the footer is simple. We have a footer tag, and I'm going to do the section tag here. Section dark. And then I want to do footer section because I'm going to target this inside my footer CSS file. And then add a container. And then footer. And then footer top. And footer bottom. So we have a top part for the footer, which is this, and then a bottom part here. So let's see the top section first. We're gonna have a footer logo, and this is gonna be column 1 and span 5. So we're gonna do the grid thing here again. And then we have a UL with class footer menu and col6 span 3. We're going to say li work studio and contact. And then we have another menu, but this starts at column 9. There's going to be Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So let's set up the file here for this. So footer, and that's the last thing we need here. So the section that I set up, I just want the padding to be static or not be affected by the section. So I'm just going to say padding 4.8 rem and 0. And the top and the bottom should have the page grid. And the top has a margin bottom of 16 rem. And I'm going to include the fluid type here. I'm going to say 430 pixels and 1440 pixels. It's going to go between 16 pixels and 24. And the bottom, I'm just going to set the font size to something static, so 16 pixels, because these are different. So this is bigger and this is smaller. And then for the menus, I'm going to do the same thing. Margin left, 0. List style, none. And then the LIs should have a bit margin bottom. Like that. So we have this, and now we just need the bottom part. So top and then bottom. And then we have a div with column 1 spanning 5. And that's just two A tags. I'm going to say privacy and cookies. And this is column 6 span 3. Span 3. And that's just the street name. And then column 9 span 3. And just email at company.com. Like that. Okay, there's something wrong here. There should be 1. Yeah. Cool. So let's see. We have everything we need now. So that was really simple, just to set this up with the styling and the markup. In the next video, we're going to animate this and make it look really smooth and set up the JavaScript files and how you would structure that. I really hope you enjoy this video and learn a lot from it. I think working this way, it might seem like a lot in the beginning when you first start learning this. This is a setup that I've just experimented with myself, and I just really enjoy it. I feel like I can be very productive with this. So I hope you learned something from it, and yeah, I hope to see you in the next video where we're really going to make this project shine.